Between our first and our last breath, our life is a series of seasons. Every high and low is a season that shapes us. In this series, we'll see how Jesus meets and leads us through every season.
Busy. It's probably the most commonly used adjective in my life. There's always something or many somethings going on. I'm working at the kids' school this year. The boys are in football and have practice 4 nights a week and games on the weekends. My husband is working out of town for a couple of months, along with all the other things of life that need to happen, like laundry, housework, grocery shopping, and making dinner to keep my small people alive and healthy. Sometimes the tears squeeze out because it all feels so overwhelming to carry. It's like when you're out in the cold for a long time and your body has to direct all its energy to keeping your vital organs alive, and your extremities get a little cut off from the blood supply. That's how I've felt for the last few months. Just trying to hold all the things together, not really able to look outside at anything else, just trying to survive until the end of this busy season. I long for something different, for space to breathe and time to rest. But for me, the reality is that when it slows down, I don't know what to do with myself. I've been moving so fast for so long that I don't know how to stop. Is it okay to sit on the couch and read for an hour or take a nap? Shouldn't I be doing something more productive? There's always something to do, always something clamoring for my attention. I say I don't love being busy, but I can't seem to stop. For me, busy quickly becomes my identity, how I measure my worth and progress in the world. When I stop long enough to let my breath settle, to let my body get nervous from being still, that's when I hear Jesus' voice reminding me, I've got you, you're okay. What does it look like to be still? To abide? To rest? Rest seems so elusive. Maybe because I have a specific picture of what rest looks like, and my picture is not always a reality as a mom of 3, working and caring for our household. But I know there is rest to be had in Jesus. I'm still working to figure out what that looks like. Some mornings it looks like sitting on the couch, eyes closed, just being still. I want to read my Bible every morning, but sometimes I'm so tired that the words won't sink in. It's those moments when I've heard the Spirit's voice tell me that just being with Him is enough, that I don't have to do something special or read enough chapters to check off my quiet time, and that sometimes just sitting still and quiet is enough. It's a place to start trading my heavy burdens for His yoke that is easy and light. Life isn't going to slow down on its own. I have to make choices to stop, to say no to things, even good things. And sometimes there's no choice to say no. There's just too many things that have to happen. But in the midst of the busyness, in the midst of a chaotic world, I do know that Jesus promises He is with me. Like He says in Matthew, are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly.
Say thank you to Julie for sharing her story. So we're working our way through in this season where we're looking at how life is a series of different seasons, highs and lows and ups and downs. And the reason we're looking at them is because these seasons, they shape us, either to be more like the world or to be more like Jesus. And I think it feels appropriate and makes sense to do this during the Christmas season because whatever we're going through, it just seems to be heightened during the holidays. Have you noticed this? Like if this has been a year of grief, it hits you in a different way in the holidays as you gather around family and loved ones and you miss that person that is not around anymore. There's a different level to that. If you feel anxious during the year, it ramps up in the holidays as you wrap up the year and have all these things going on, all these social events, and the new year is coming. It just seems to build. And what we're talking about today, busyness, it does not slow down during the holidays, does it? I actually think this is the season of busyness is something that we all experience. But the reason we're talking about these seasons is to not just, hey, let's get this out there, but to look at how Jesus meets us and leads us through every season. So when I'm talking about a season of busyness, I want to first clarify what I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about a full life, okay? Because, it can get to the point where people invite you to be a part of something and you're like, oh, no, I can't. I got to say no. They're like, yeah, you're just so busy. Like, no, I'm actually full. Like, I've been intentional about. And so there's a level of busyness where you're purposeful about what you're participating in. You're engaged in a deep way. And so it actually fits in a beautiful way. So that's not what I'm saying when we talk about busy and how that maps out and what it looks like. I'm also not talking about the opposite of busy season. I'm not saying, oh, let's go for a boring life, okay? Where you're just like, you do nothing of substance or meaning. You're no longer working hard, and Sabbath seems to be a perpetual state of being, okay? That's not what we're going for. We're not going for the boring life. But I'm also not talking about, we use this word, when we pursue it, we talk about a balanced life. Anybody see that? I just need a life of balance. I just need to work through my work-life balance. I get why we use it. It sounds great. But have you ever tried to balance something without feeling tons of stress and anxiety that's going to crash at any moment? You wonder why, like, you feel like you're on the edge of collapse when you're just balancing your life. It's because that's what balance is, whether you're on a balance beam or you're holding something in your hands. So that's not the goal. What we're talking about is, now, how do we live a sustained pace, a rhythm to our lives? And so when we talk about a busy season, here's kind of the definition I want to give you. Busy is a season of life where you have so much going on that you're unable to rest. Your true priorities slip, and you lose the ability to enjoy the present moment you are in. Because when you're not resting, it leads to burnout. When your priorities slip, you start to lose meaning in the everyday things of life, and you don't know why you're doing them. And when you're present, you suffer, and the relationships around you suffer. Here's the truth. You guys, we're all crazy busy. There's just been this like ramp up and a different way of life than it was 50, 100, 200 years ago. Let me give you some statistical evidence on this that I think aligns. In 1879, Thomas Edison invented something. It was called the light bulb. Before he invented the light bulb, the average person slept 11 hours per night. Some of you guys are like, that's nice. Some of you are like, it feels a bit excessive, right? Like, because they didn't have light, and you're here in the Pacific Northwest, and we have 16, 18 hours of darkness. You just hibernate all winter, right? You just go through it. Today, the average number of hours people get of sleep is 7. And that's probably even dropped since these statistics have come out. Because some of you guys are like, 7 sounds nice, right? And so we see this radical difference in the pace of life and the busyness of life. In 1967, they put together a Senate subcommittee to look at the development of automation to predict what the work life would be like of people in the 80s. So it's in 1967, what would it be like in 1985? And here's what they predicted. They predicted because of the growth of automation, the average American would work only 22 hours per week and 27 weeks per year, right? For some reason, the government just doesn't seem to line up on how things really are, I mean, maybe they only do that, but, the average American, that's not where we're at, okay? Think about the mega computer sitting in your pocket. I remember when I was 16 and I got my first phone, and I told my mom, I was like, why are you getting me a phone? I'm like, I don't want a digital leash, right? Like, life was so different. Now, it's constant. People have access to you constantly. You ever go camping and you get there and you're like, oh, I don't have service. And then about 30 minutes later, you're like, oh, I don't have service. You're like, it's because people can constantly get to you or get at you. And it creates this crazy busy movement and craze. And then you even think about this, since the digital revolution, our attention span has dropped to 8 seconds. TikTok, YouTube, all this stuff. For context, the attention span of a goldfish is 9. We're not doing great as a species right now, is what I'll say, okay? And so the overbusy, hurried life of speed is now the new normal in the Western world, and it's killing our souls. And here's some of the marks of crazy busy, just to point out. One, the inability to rest or slow down. You're constantly restless. When you try to slow down, when you try to read your Bible, when you try to take a day off, you can't even settle in. There's a constant restlessness to your soul because your drug of choice is dopamine. and you constantly want that hit, and when you don't get it. Second, a deprioritized life. Now, what's happening is you get sucked into the tyranny of the urgent rather than the important. Your life is reactive rather than proactive. You're just constantly doing the things, the next email, the next phone call, the next text, the next task that somebody has for you, and you're moving through those. This is why a midlife crisis happens. You reach a point in your life and you're like, all the things I thought I was living for and was gonna build with my life, I've never accomplished because I'm constantly putting out fires. I'm constantly moving to the next thing, and the things of substance are slipping constantly. Third, an inability to be present. You're so wrapped up in all the things you have to do that even in the present moment, you get there and your mind and heart is somewhere else, right? Even for some of you guys, like right now, you're like, I see that you're talking. I know that words are coming out of your mouth, preacher boy, but I got a lot of things that I'm thinking about right now. Your mind is elsewhere because you're not even able to be present. See, the true cost of an overly busy life is the most important relationships and the state of your soul. That's who loses out. It's like the sign I read that says adulting is saying, but after this week, things will slow down a bit over and over until you die, right? Yeah, and it resonates with us a little bit. Now, here's what I need to understand. Like, I align with this a lot. This state, I mean, it really speaks to me because I'm a bit of a driven individual. When my wife and I got married, we were like, hey, we're just going to take the first 5 years. We're not going to have kids. We're just going to enjoy life together, slow down. Within our first 5 to 6 years of being married, we had 2 kids. I owned a business. We planted a church. I had 4 rental properties, bought land to build a house. And oh, by the way, as a church, we bought a skating rink to remodel. Boom, boom, boom. I mean, it was like go, go, go. And then this thing hit. It's called, I forget how it's pronounced, but COVID. Yeah, you guys remember that? Yeah. And the world shut down. And all of a sudden, all this rush of meetings and happenings, I'm like, I don't know how to get through this, what is happening? And my wife was like, this is nice. I could do this pace. Could we just shut down the world forever? We just stay at home. It was this great contrast in our lives because you think about planting a church and launching, there's so much energy that goes into launching something, and we were going hard. And I remember this conversation a few months in. My wife was sharing with me how the state of her soul, how she was feeling emotionally. And you know how sometimes it's helpful to write things down versus verbalize them? Some of you guys are more written processors. She's like, actually, there's a note on my phone where I wrote this, and I kind of was processing through some stuff, and I'd love for you to read it. And so I grab her phone, and I pull up the note, and I start reading through. And about halfway through, I realized I actually grabbed the wrong note. I'm not reading a note how she's feeling about her emotions. I'm reading a note about how she's feeling about being married to me and the pace we're operating at. And she just simply ends it with this illustration. She says, I feel like I'm married to a freight train and I am running behind, trying to catch up, hoping I don't get left behind. That's not a good state. And I remember in that moment being like, I gotta change. I need to operate in a different way for the sake of my wife, for the sake of my kids, for my friendships, for our staff, for the people who are connected in our church. And so these last 4 years have been this journey of man, how do we live in a different way? How do I live in a different way? I don't have less responsibilities now. But I'm operating in a different way. And this might sound crazy, but what I decided to do was look to Jesus and say, how does he live? What pace and priorities and mode of life does he walk in? And so that's just what I want to do today. I just want to look at 3 things from the life of Jesus because I think we can all relate to either being really crazy busy or feeling the pull to be crazy busy. And so let's look at Luke chapter 4, starting in verse 40, and we kind of zoom into this story. And it allows us to kind of start to pull some things out from his life. It says, at sunset, the people brought to Jesus all who had various kinds of sickness. And laying his hands on each one, he healed them. Moreover, demons came out of many people, shouting, "You are the Son of God." But he rebuked them and would not allow them to speak, because they knew he was the Messiah. At daybreak, Jesus went out to a solitary place. The people were looking for him, and when they came to where he was, they tried to keep him from leaving them. But he said, "I must proclaim the good news of the kingdom of God to the other towns also, because that is why I was sent." And he kept on preaching in the synagogues of Judea. The first thing we see, and I think we need to apply to our lives, is we need to prioritize purpose over pressures. You have a lot of pressure in your life. You have a lot of things that are constantly tugging for your time, for your attention, for your soul. Pressure at work to execute. Pressure from friends to hang. Pressure at church to serve. Pressure at home to provide. Pressure from society to succeed. Pressure from emails and texts to respond. It's just constantly this pull. You feel it like, man, whatever I do, I'm disappointing somebody, right? And what I want you to see is like, Jesus had that too. I mean, look, the scene we walk into, there's literally sick people coming up. They're bringing their children. They're like, "Please don't leave. Heal my children." There's demon-possessed people that need to be released from these demons. There's hungry people that need to be fed. And this mob comes and they show up looking for him. Like, he gets away from some solitude. He goes to have some quiet time with God. You ever been interrupted in your quiet time? All the moms are like, "Yes, welcome to my life," right? He tries to get away, and they're coming after him, and they're like, "You can't leave." And they have really good reasons, right? Somebody's like, no, like these neighbors of mine, these people I love, they aren't healed yet. You have more work to do. And what Jesus does, he's like, I have more places to go. I have more sermons to preach. I have to keep going and pressing on. How does he do that? It's because he prioritizes his purpose over the pressures that he's facing. He's clear on his priorities. He knows what they are. He knows why he came. Why did he come? One, he came to proclaim and preach the good news. That's what he literally says right here in this passage. Second, he came to give a glimpse of the kingdom that he is ushering in. This is why he heals people and feeds them and casts out demons. He's trying to give us a glimpse of what heaven's like. And he's like, no. When the kingdom comes, there will be no more sickness. There will be no more pain. There will be no more suffering. There will be no more evil. And so he's ushering in the new kingdom, and he's giving a glimpse of it. But he also has this really important thing he needs to do. Called saving humanity from the pit of hell. And he's like, listen, I'm not saying this is a bad thing. This is actually a really good thing. But I got to go to Golgotha. I need to go to Calvary. I need to continue pressing forward in my calling and my purpose. And I can't get derailed by all these good things to where I no longer can live the better thing that I'm called to walk in. The brother of Jesus, James, he writes about this. He talks about time in this life. And here's what he says. He says, yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. He's like, man, we only have so much time. We need to recognize the brevity of life, and we need to respond with prioritized living. We need to put the most important things in first. He's like, if life is but a vapor, we need to live with purpose and prioritization. And so this is not about, well, don't do things anymore. It's like, no, you have to choose what you say yes and what you say no to. I want to walk you through something that I was walked through a number of years ago, and I can't get it out of my head. It shapes how I think about life. And we only have so much time in a given year and a given life. We can't, and pretend this container is the time that we have. And we can't add to it. We can't expand. Like there's no adding of time, okay? Until time travel is invented. But even then, I have a feeling we're still going to be busy, okay? Right? And I'm not saying I think I digress. Okay. I don't know what happened there. Imagine the biggest priorities in your life are these big rocks, okay? These are the most important things to you. Now, it could be something unique, but you need to be aware what your big priorities are. And for me, my priorities are my faith, my relationship with Jesus, because I know the state of my soul deeply matters and my relationship with him. Second is my family and my friends. This is a big rock for me. Like, man, if I start to lose this, what am I living for? What am I moving towards? What am I pouring into? And then third is my calling. I feel a really strong calling in what we're doing in this church and how I'm called to raise up leaders and preach the gospel and see the city transform. These are my big rocks. But we all have responsibilities, right? And so these responsibilities come along, and some are big and some are small. And you know, we say things like, if it only takes 5 minutes to do it, just do it, right? You know, or I just got to respond to the email. And so we just start doing these small tasks and responsibilities, and they just begin to fill. And you're like, that's fine, they're small, they're not that big of a deal. But then they just keep coming, do they not, right? And we gotta keep pouring out, and we gotta keep living in this way, and gotta keep doing more. And like, wow, you know, nobody's gonna take out the trash, like, you know, all these things. And what happens is we reach this point, is we do all these things, we do the urgent, and then it comes to the important. And we're like, I mean, it kind of fits in there, right? We got a little bit, well, I mean, you know, I got some time for faith and a little bit for family. And, you know, here's my calling. Ta-da, right? And you're like, that's not how it's meant to be. Have you ever noticed in a busy season, it's the most important things to you that get cut first? It's slowing down and spending time reading the word and in prayer. You're like, I'd love to. I'm just so busy. Work takes precedent over your family. And rather than going on date night, rather than spending time with your kids, you're like, no, I just need to get through this season. Can I just remind you, a couple decades from now, the only people who are going to remember all those late nights that you stayed at work, it's not going to be your boss and your coworkers. It's going to be your kids that were neglected in the process. And so it becomes this leftover. We're not living in the way that we're called to. And this is what I've been taught. And this is how I've had to reorientate my life, is we all have so much time, and so the most important things, you guys, they need to go in first. You got to start there. And then it's not that these are not important. Like, you have to do these tasks. Like, it's probably a good thing to take out the trash. Like, I'm not saying these aren't important, but they come in afterwards. And they have to fit around the top priorities and the important values, the big rocks of your life. And you're gonna get to the end and you're gonna realize, like, man, but I'm not able to get it all in. Exactly. But here's the thing. You want these things to be neglected, not these things to be neglected. You want the tasks and the responsibilities and the pressures to be neglected, not the important, most valuable things in your life. And so we need to reprioritize our life around purpose, not just pressures, not all the things that people want us to do. And so as we wrap up this year and we go into the next one, man, start now. Say, what does next year look like for my family? Like, what are the trips we're gonna plan? What are the date nights, the family nights? How do I put those on the calendar first? What are the things in the state of my soul and time with God and the priorities of faith? Where does that come first? All of these areas, like, we need to reorientate how we prioritize our lives. Second, we need to cultivate a rhythm of rest and margin in our lives. You guys seen that new feature on the iPhones? Maybe it's been around for a little while, I just discovered it, but in your photos, where you can just search a word and anything that fits that category will come up. So I did this the other day with the word cat. And I have 481 photos of cats on my phone. That feels a bit excessive. And I'm going through and, like, this is kind of embarrassing, but here's what most of them look like. They're cats that know how to sleep. Like, cats are like professional resters. Like, they're so good at it. And I would love to be like, here's my 3 cat photos. Like, no, I have more. Like, here's more of cats sleeping. They look like this, this, and this. Like, just like there's Waffles, just like Waffles can find anywhere to sleep and just somehow makes it look like the most comfortable rest you've ever had of your life. Jessie will walk in the room. She's like, I wish I was a cat. Like, just that life, the joy, the peace. Now, here's what I understand. I understand that there's a theological debate whether or not cats were created by God or a result of the fall. And that's a fair debate to have, okay? It absolutely is. But let's just say by chance they were created by God. There's all these places in Scripture where Jesus or Solomon in Proverbs is looking to say, look at creation, look at the ants, look at the birds of the field, and what do we take from them? And if we can look at the birds of the air and learn something in the lilies of the field, then maybe we can look at the cat of the couch and learn something of what it means to thrive in our calling. Now, I know, like, I'm bordering on heresy by saying something positive about cats, so, like, maybe we'll just skip all of that. And maybe we should look to Jesus and look at the life and the rhythm and the pattern that he walked. Look at Matthew 8:24. There's this furious storm that comes on this lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. And what is Jesus doing? His disciples are freaking out. And Jesus is having nap time, right? It's siesta hour. He's napping. And there's actually multiple times we see this with Jesus. The whole reason he has the interaction with the woman at the well is because they're going into town. And he's like, I'm actually tired. I'm going to sit by this well and I'm going to rest. In Luke 4 and 5, it talks about at daybreak, Jesus went out to a solitary place. It says, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. It's this pattern. It's this rhythm we see in his life. He teaches his disciples to do it. He says, then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to his disciples, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. This is the rhythm and the pace of Jesus. They're like, Jesus, keep going. He's like, you know what? I'm not in my resurrected body yet. And this fragile temple that you guys walk around in, I got to slow down. Part of looking to Jesus is, yes, he's our Savior. Yes, he is God. But he's also living the fullest version of a human life that we could experience. He's showing us how to actually walk. And in our lives, we've become addicted to the rush of a busy life, so much so that we feel lazy when we take a nap. We feel like undervalued when we take a day off, or we have a problem actually seeing an opening in our schedule. But you guys, that's the way of the world, not the way of Jesus. We should look to him as our model. And what's happened is there's this cultural spiral of busyness that has affected our spiritual life. Michael Zigarelli, he's a professor at Charleston Southern University School of Business, and he interviewed 20,000 Christians. And he's like trying to figure out the state of why is there such an emotional disconnect? Why is there such a spiritual disconnect? And here's his hypothesis, kind of where he landed. He's like, listen, here's the case. Christians are assimilating to a culture of busyness, hurry, and overload. So the world around us, the culture around us is like, go, 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 go. And we are not living counter to that. We've just assimilated. We're like, no, early bird gets the worm. You got to go. You got to hustle. Go, go, go. And what that's led to is God becoming more marginalized in Christians' lives. And because God has become more marginalized, that's led to a deteriorating relationship with God. And because we've had that's led to Christians becoming even more vulnerable to adopting secular assumptions about the way we live and walk. And because of that, we've become even more conformed to a culture of busyness, hurry, and overload, and a cycle begins again. And what's happening is we're like, man, we're trying to live this life. We're trying to keep up with the culture around us. And in the meantime, our souls are dying. And we're like, I don't even have the internal fortitude. I don't have the depth of my relationship with God to keep up at the pace that I'm trying to operate in. And Jesus is like, man, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest for your souls. He's like, no, take my way of living upon you. About 8 or 9 years ago, I was headed to IKEA. And you know how they have all those restaurants around IKEA? This new one had just opened up. And it was really unique. It caught my eye because they sold only 2 things. There's 2 things you could buy: fried chicken sandwiches and bratwurst. And I was like, someone has a very specific preference, but it sounds good to me, okay? So I go in, and this place was bustling. Like, apparently there's a whole segment of our society that their chosen meal is fried chicken sandwich and bratwurst, okay? Honorable people. So I'm waiting in line and just seeing, all the workers and the buzz, and, people are ordering and just going through. And so I order my fried chicken sandwich. It doesn't take very long. They cook it up and they bring it back, and I'm sitting there, I'm eating it, and I'm like, this is one of the greatest chicken sandwiches I've ever had in my life. This is before Chick-fil-A ever made its way to the heathen side of the country, the western coast, right? And so, I'm just sitting there, I'm like, this is unbelievable, right? I'm eating through this. It's so good, I get halfway through, and I'm like, I gotta see what's in this sandwich. Because I'm like, I wanna recreate this. This is delicious. It's literally the most tender chicken I've ever had in my life. And so I open the sandwich, and this is what I see inside. I realize why it's so tender. It's because they made me chicken sushi. It was like, I open it up and I had this panic moment of what is going on, right? So I take it and I go to the manager, I pull the manager aside. I'm like, hey, can I show you something? And he's like, yeah. And I pull it up and he goes, oh, right? And I look at him, I go, what's gonna happen to me? I don't know. I'm literally like, is this should I write my will? Do I make my phone calls? Am I going to die, And he starts walking through all the different things. He's like, well, here's what you need to be careful of, and all the ins and outs. And he's panicked because he's like, we just served, chicken sushi to this guy, and he didn't order it. And so he gives me my money back and hands me a vitamin water. As if for some reason, vitamin water just has the cure to salmonella in it, And so I go in the car, I sit in my car, I text my wife, I'm trying to figure, I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna be preaching, I don't think I'm gonna be preaching this weekend, what is my life gonna look like? Trying to look up all the symptoms, drinking the vitamin water, just pouring the vitamin water, anything that can happen. What happened was, the reason this took place, they were in such a hurry, all the busyness of what's happening is they undercooked my meal. And undercooked chicken is dangerous. It's dangerous. And I have this worry that we are walking around with an undercooked spirituality. We preaching yet? That we're no, just flip it on both sides, throw some breadcrumbs on it, call it good. And then life hits and we're like, I don't know how to respond. I don't know how to handle the pressures because we're so busy we will not even slow down to spend time with Jesus. And you know what Jesus said? He said, you need to learn to abide. And the reason we don't abide is because we're going. And so what if we started to live at a different rhythm and pace? That said, man, I need to prioritize my purpose above just the pressures around me. I need to seek after a rhythm of rest and margin. I need to learn how to say no to all the things going on so that I can move in a deeper way and spend time with Jesus. And what all that leads to is all of a sudden we start living a life where we're able to practice presence over preoccupation. You ever been around somebody who's just so present in the moment? They listen differently. They see things differently. They observe differently. They hear you differently. That's Jesus. I can't help but read the Gospels and be overcome with the people he notices that nobody else does. He's in this crowd and people are pressing against him and all up against him. And he sees the bleeding woman. He feels her touch. And he's like, who touched me? And they're like, are you kidding me? There's a crowd. Everybody's touching you. He's present in the moment. He sees Zacchaeus when everybody else just sees a tax collector. He sees a future disciple that he wants to pour out love to and welcome him into his family. And when that woman pours the perfume on his feet, anoints his feet and washes his feet with her hair, he sees worship when everybody else sees waste. Why? Because he's present in that moment. It's as if the God who is outside of time is able to enter into the present moment in a different way than we are. It's like he's able to say oh, this is a sacred moment right here. This is worth being present with these people. This is worth observing in a different way. Man, what if we, instead of being preoccupied with all we have to do, could actually be in a moment and enjoy it and recognize it and see the people around us? As one person put, one of my favorite quotes ever, I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them. Yeah, which of course is theologian Andy Bernard from The Office. But it's so true, is it not? A number of years ago, my dad, he took a video of a bunch of us at the beach, and he sent it to me and my sister and my brother. And dads take terrible videos, right? And then for some reason think you need to see it. Like, look at the video I took. Like, Dad, we were just there, right? We saw it. And he's kind of like, he's sitting down in a chair and he starts recording. And he's like taking it of nothing. And he's kind of like just, you just hear all the wind. And he's just kind of like meandering through like all of us there. And the first thing you see my mom, and she's there with my wife and our daughter Nova, and they're building sandcastles, right? And then he kind of pans over, and there's my son Dax. He's really young at the time, and he's there with my brother-in-law Chris and their dog Lola, and they're just kind of goofing around and playing around. And then he pans over, and it's just me and my sister sitting, having a conversation, as the waves are crashing on this beach, and there's my brother and his kids, and then it just ends, right? Like, thanks, Dad. I love that video now. See, what I didn't know at the time was that was going to be our last time together as a family. My mom would pass away 3 months later. It was going to be our last Thanksgiving, our last time on her beach, last time for my kids to be with her. But the other reason I love it is I'm like, those seemingly meaningless moments, like that's the sacred stuff, is it not? Like we make all this about the high, big moments, the graduations, the climactic moments, the memorable things. But it's like a majority of life is those simple moments. And here's what I realized, like if you today, right now, could be like, you could go anywhere in the world and anytime, I'd probably go back to that beach. And I'd enjoy it in a different way. I'd be present in a different way. I'd see it through a different lens. Jesus walked that way. What if this Christmas, rather than worrying about the next event and the next task and the next thing that we have to get to, like what if we decided we could live and soak this in like this was the good old days? This is the thing that we haven't even left yet. What if as your kids are opening presents, you didn't worry so much about getting that perfect picture on each one? What if dads, I'm calling you out, you didn't worry about where the wrapping paper all went after each gift? Like, what if you just like took a moment and chilled out and just soaked in the joy of that moment? What if Christmas dinner wasn't about it being Pinterest perfect? What if it was about the people around the table and the stories that you tell and the things that you laugh about and the moments of silence that aren't awkward silence, they're comfortable silence. And you could just enjoy in a different way. What if making those Christmas cookies wasn't about the mess on the counter that has to be cleaned up or how sticky the fingers are? What if it was about the smiles and the memories? What if it was the good old days while we're actually in them? The only way we can do that is we have to realign our priorities and say, no, this moment matters. These people matter. We have to intentionally create a pace of life that slows down and says like, no, I want some rest. I want some margin. I need some abiding with Jesus so I can see life in a deeper way. And then that allows us to slow down all the activity, all the busyness, and actually be present. What if we started to live the pace of Jesus? Be present like him, slow, purposeful. Like, what if we lived the pace of love? Man, that would shape our lives in a drastic way. Jesus, would you help us as your followers to just look to you, to stop trying to perform and meet other people's expectations or go, go, go. Like we want not boring lives, we want full lives. Lives that are full of the right things, full of intentional rest, full of intentional presence, full of relationships that we just want to be with and cherish and long for. Would you just help us to be disciples of you, walking your pace, living with your rhythm, being fully present in a way, in a distracted world, that we can offer our love and your grace and your peace. Lord, would you do that in us? We pray all this in your name, and all God's people said, amen.